The room buzzed with quiet laughter and polite clinking of glasses. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over the elegantly dressed guests, their faces gleaming with careful smiles. At the center of it all sat Mark, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his posture rigid with confidence. Every gesture, every glance seemed calculated, a man determined to be admired, envied, and respected. Beside him, Amina sat with a quiet elegance. Her dark skin glowed softly under the light, her hair neatly braided, her attire tasteful yet subtle. She carried herself with grace, a reflection of her intelligence and dignity. But tonight, beneath her composed exterior, a storm of discomfort and hurt simmered. As the conversation shifted to Mark's latest project, he leaned toward Amina with a smirk. "Oh, Amina," he said, his tone teasing, "you pronounced that completely wrong. I can't believe anyone would actually say it like that." A gentle ripple of laughter followed, polite at first, then nervous, as the other guests glanced between them. Amina's lips pressed into a thin line. She smiled faintly, masking the sting of humiliation. Her heart ached, not for herself, but for the way Mark's laughter diminished her in front of others. She had always loved him, truly, with all her heart. But moments like this chipped away at her pride. Each subtle mockery, each correction in front of colleagues or friends, left invisible bruises. Tonight, she bore it silently, keeping her emotions carefully hidden behind calm composure. Mark, oblivious or indifferent, returned to his triumphant storytelling. He thrived on attention, always the center of admiration. He didn't notice the flicker of disappointment in Amina's eyes, the small sigh she suppressed. Her quiet endurance only encouraged his behavior. The conversation moved on, and Amina nodded politely, letting the laughter wash over her like a tide she could not escape. She reflected on the irony. She had spent years refining her speech, mastering languages, excelling in her career, yet none of it seemed to matter when it collided with Mark's pride and need for superiority. She stole a glance at him, catching his confident smile as he exchanged a knowing wink with a colleague. He was a man who needed to appear flawless, who fed on approval, who measured life in applause and recognition. Amina had once adored that charm, the confidence that drew people to him. But tonight, she felt the weight of her own dignity pressing against the humiliation she endured. The dinner continued with polite chatter, yet a subtle tension lingered between them, unspoken, yet palpable. Amina's heart ached as she realized that love alone could not shield her from the sharp edges of Mark's arrogance. And somewhere, deep inside, she knew that his behavior, unchecked and unchallenged, could eventually lead to consequences neither of them were prepared for. She adjusted her posture, took a sip of wine, and smiled for the room. Polite. Composed. Resilient. But inside, a quiet storm brewed, foreshadowing a collision of pride, love, and the inevitable reckoning that would test both their hearts. Amina remains composed but emotionally strained. Mark is oblivious to her pain, consumed by his own vanity and need for admiration. The spark of conflict is lit, the foundation for the drama to unfold. The sunlight spilled softly through the curtains, painting the room in shades of gold. Amina sat at the small desk in the corner of their modern apartment, her journal open before her. She wrote with quiet focus, her pen moving swiftly across the page. Thoughts of yesterday's dinner lingered, Mark's laughter, the polite smiles of the guests, the subtle but cutting correction of her accent. "Mark, I really think you should consider this approach for your presentation," Amina said gently, approaching him in the study. She held a carefully prepared report, full of insights that could strengthen his upcoming pitch. Mark barely glanced up from his phone, his fingers scrolling through emails with a practiced air of superiority. "Amina, I appreciate it, really," he said, waving her suggestion away, "but I've got it under control. You know, sometimes less is more." Amina's heart sank. She had expected this. Not because she doubted him, but because she had seen this pattern so many times before. Mark thrived on appearances, on the perception that he was in command of everything, even if it meant dismissing the intelligence right beside him. She let out a quiet sigh and retreated to the corner of the room, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her notes. She loved him. She truly did. But the repeated dismissals, the constant need to assert superiority, gnawed at her. Her mind wandered back to moments of public ridicule, the meeting where he interrupted her mid-sentence, the cocktail party where he corrected her pronunciation in front of colleagues, the countless times he treated her insights as trivial. It wasn't just hurt, it was frustration. Amina knew her worth. She excelled in her career, spoke multiple languages fluently, and had navigated challenges in life that Mark could never fully comprehend. Yet, in his presence, her accomplishments often felt invisible. Later, at a casual gathering with friends, Mark once again found the opportunity to assert himself. "You mean strategy, not strategy," he said lightly, smirking at Amina's phrasing. A few friends laughed awkwardly, unsure whether to join in. Amina smiled faintly, masking the sting of humiliation. She had learned long ago that arguing would only feed his pride and draw unwanted attention. Instead, she remained composed, offering polite conversation to others while Mark basked in the glow of his social dominance. One of her close friends noticed. "You're too kind, Amina." "He doesn't see how brilliant you are," she whispered later. Amina nodded, feeling both the comfort of understanding and the ache of repeated dismissal. That night, as the apartment quieted, Amina sat by the window, gazing at the city lights below. She opened her journal again and poured her thoughts onto the pages. She wrote about Mark's arrogance, the sharp edges of his words, and the quiet frustration she carried inside. Yet she also wrote about hope, the hope that one day, he would see her not as a reflection of his vanity but as a partner, equal in intellect and dignity. Mark, meanwhile, scrolled through his emails, planning his next career move. The ambition in his eyes shone brightly, a man obsessed with reputation, appearances, and success. He believed nothing could challenge him. He didn't realize that the very arrogance he prized might one day lead him into a situation where he would need Amina's insight, intelligence, and unwavering calm. Unseen by him, Amina closed her journal, her fingers lingering on the cover. She had love, yes, but she also had pride. She had dignity. And in the quiet moments between them, a silent tension grew, the kind that waits patiently, ready to ignite when the right storm arrives. The scene ended with a lingering sense of suspense, love and frustration intertwined, pride and humility poised for collision. The seeds of tension were planted, hinting that Mark's arrogance could not remain unchecked forever, and Amina's intelligence and strength might one day become the very force that saves them both. Amina is emotionally withdrawn yet reflective and strong. Mark remains arrogant and unaware of the consequences of his dismissiveness. The tension grows, setting the stage for the crisis to come. The city skyline stretched endlessly through the tall glass windows of Mark's office. Sunlight glinted off the steel and glass, but inside, the room felt cold and suffocating. Mark sat at his desk, his polished shoes tapping against the floor, his mind racing. For years, he had built a flawless reputation, precise, commanding, untouchable. And now, it was unraveling. Reports of a financial miscalculation had surfaced. A critical project he had overseen had failed, and whispers of incompetence were spreading through the office like wildfire. His emails were filled with urgent requests and frustrated inquiries. His phone rang constantly, colleagues, clients, even news outlets seeking confirmation. Panic pricked at the edges of his ego. "No, this can't be happening," Mark muttered under his breath, pacing the room. He refused to reach out for help. He was Mark, successful, confident, untouchable. Only he could fix this. Hours turned into an exhausting day. Every attempt to control the situation seemed to backfire. The numbers didn't add up. Stakeholders questioned his judgment. Even his closest colleagues began exchanging wary glances, unsure whether to trust him. He tried calling a few contacts he thought could salvage the situation, but each call ended in frustration or outright refusal. His isolation deepened. For the first time in years, Mark felt the sharp bite of vulnerability. The control he had relied upon so heavily was slipping through his fingers. That evening, Mark returned home, his face tight with stress. The apartment that once felt like a sanctuary now felt oppressive. He leaned against the doorway, taking in the sight of Amina quietly preparing dinner, her movements calm, deliberate, and controlled. For a moment, he watched her in silence. She seemed unshakable, the embodiment of composure. And then a thought hit him: she had always been capable, intelligent, resourceful. Perhaps she could see solutions where he could not. Perhaps she could fix what he had failed to control. The thought filled him with both desperation and shame. Asking for help meant admitting weakness. Admitting weakness meant facing the fact that he had belittled her countless times, mocking her accent, dismissing her ideas, treating her intellect as secondary. Amina noticed his lingering gaze but did not speak immediately. She had seen that look before, the look of a man realizing, too late, that he might need someone he had ignored or belittled. She continued chopping vegetables, each slice precise, her silence deliberate. Inside, she weighed the decision carefully. Could she help him now, after years of subtle ridicule? Could she step in to salvage a situation he created, knowing that her own pride deserved respect? Her heart twisted between compassion and self-preservation. Mark finally broke the silence. "Amina. I think I need your help," he said, voice low, almost unrecognizable. The words felt heavy, laden with pride reluctantly surrendered. Amina paused, her knife hovering over the cutting board. Her calm, steady gaze met his, and for a moment, the years of hurt and frustration flashed between them, dinners where he corrected her, meetings where he interrupted her, moments of humiliation she had swallowed in silence. Mark's eyes searched hers, pleading, yet tinged with guilt. I can't do this alone. I thought I could, but I was wrong." Amina's mind raced. She could help, yes, but the situation demanded not only skill but courage, the courage to confront her own emotions while navigating the chaos that Mark's arrogance had created. She understood the stakes, the company's reputation, Mark's career, and the fragile trust in their relationship. Her internal struggle was immense. Anger simmered beneath her calm exterior, yet a part of her longed to see him learn, to see him truly understand the consequences of pride unchecked by humility. Finally, she spoke, her voice measured yet firm. "I can help. But you must understand something, Mark. This isn't just about fixing your mistake. You need to recognize how you've treated me all these years. My voice, my ideas, they matter. And if you want my help, that's the first step." Mark swallowed hard, a lump in his throat. For the first time, he realized the depth of the rift his arrogance had caused. His pride, which had once been his greatest weapon, now threatened to destroy everything he had built, including the woman he loved and had taken for granted. The room fell silent. Outside, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the personal storm inside. Mark's ego had been shattered, his control lost. Amina held the power to guide them through the crisis, but she also held the moral authority to demand acknowledgement, respect, and equality. The turning point was clear: the crisis had arrived, and with it, the opportunity for redemption, growth, and reconciliation. But whether Mark would rise to the challenge, or falter under the weight of his own arrogance, remained uncertain. Mark faces a career and personal crisis, his arrogance isolates him. Amina observes silently, weighing whether to help. The emotional stakes are high, and the story is poised for confrontation and transformation in the next section. The apartment was quiet, the soft hum of the city outside barely audible through the glass windows. Mark sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. His eyes, usually so confident and sharp, now flickered with uncertainty, regret, and fear. Across the room, Amina stood near the window, arms folded, her expression calm but resolute. The room was tense, thick with years of unspoken hurt, pride, and frustration. Mark took a deep breath. Amina. I need your help, he began, his voice unusually small, almost vulnerable. Amina didn't move. Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. You don't just need my help, Mark. You need to understand why I've stayed silent all these years. Why I've tolerated the way you dismissed me, mocked me, belittled me in front of everyone, she said, her voice measured but carrying the weight of long-suppressed emotion. Mark swallowed hard, the words sinking in. His ego wavered under the weight of her gaze. I know I've made mistakes. I didn't realize, his voice faltered. I was proud, arrogant. I thought I knew everything. Amina's eyes narrowed slightly. You didn't just think you knew everything. You made me feel small, as if my voice, my accent, my intelligence, none of it mattered. And now, after all these years, you want me to save you? Mark looked down, shame burning in his chest. I didn't see it before. I never wanted to hurt you, Amina. But I was blind to your worth, to your strength. Her breath caught. The anger, the hurt, and the quiet sorrow all mixed together. For years, she had loved him, truly loved him, yet she had endured subtle humiliation, masking her pain behind politeness and composure. Now, faced with his humility, she felt the storm inside her shift between doubt and hope. Her mind replayed moments vividly. The dinner where Mark corrected her pronunciation in front of clients, laughing lightly as others joined in. The board meeting where he interrupted her mid-sentence, dismissing her strategy as unnecessary. Friends whispering after social events, sympathetic glances that she returned with a polite smile, hiding the sting of humiliation. Each memory sharpened the edges of her pain, reminding her that love alone had not been enough to shield her from his arrogance. She stepped closer, her voice firm but not cruel. Mark, if you want my help, if you want me to stand with you now, you need to do more than just apologize. You need to recognize me, not just my skills, not just my ideas, but me. The person I am. My voice, my heritage, my mind, all of it. Mark's hands trembled slightly. He looked at her, truly looked, for the first time in years. The vulnerability in his eyes was raw, unpolished, and terrifyingly honest. I see you, Amina. I see everything I've ignored. I see the strength, the brilliance, the heart I should have cherished all along. Her lips pressed together as tears threatened to spill. The room was thick with emotion, anger, sorrow, love, and a fragile thread of hope. For the first time, Mark was no longer the man who laughed at her accent or dismissed her ideas. He was humbled, stripped of arrogance, facing the consequences of years of neglecting her dignity. Amina nodded slowly. I will help you, Mark. But only if you promise, not just with words, but with action, to respect me, to value me, and to see me as your equal. If we are to face this crisis together, it must start there. Mark's chest heaved with relief and determination. I promise, Amina. I swear, I will do better, starting now. The room seemed to exhale with them. The confrontation had stripped away pretense, revealing truth, vulnerability, and the potential for genuine partnership. Amina's resolve had met Mark's humility, setting the stage for collaboration, redemption, and the emotional growth they both needed. As they stood together in the quiet living room, the crisis outside still loomed large. The scandal, the threats to Mark's career, the public scrutiny, all remained. But now, a fragile alliance had formed, built on honesty, accountability, and the recognition of true worth. For the first time, Mark understood that success alone could not save him. He needed Amina, her mind, her insight, and her strength. And for the first time, Amina saw the possibility that he might finally become the partner she had always hoped he could be. Sunlight streamed gently through the blinds, illuminating the neat, organized workspace where Amina sat with determination etched across her face. Papers, reports, and spreadsheets were spread across the desk. Her laptop hummed quietly, alive with data and potential solutions. Mark hesitated at the doorway, shoulders tense. He was no stranger to control, but here, in this room, surrounded by her meticulous preparation, he felt powerless. He swallowed hard, a mix of pride and humility battling within him. I'll follow your lead, he admitted quietly, voice stripped of its usual arrogance. Amina looked up, her eyes calm but piercing. Good. First, we identify the gaps in the report. Then we prepare a strategy to present the corrected numbers to the stakeholders. Precision and honesty, nothing less. Mark nodded, trying to mask his apprehension, but every glance at her reminded him of the countless times he had underestimated her. Hours passed. Amina worked with focus and clarity, guiding Mark through every decision. She corrected minor errors he had overlooked, highlighted weaknesses in his approach, and suggested creative solutions he would never have considered. Mark, if we present the project like this, we can restore confidence before the media notices anything, she explained. Her voice was firm, authoritative, yet patient. He watched her, realizing for the first time the depth of her intelligence and foresight. The woman he had mocked, belittled, and ignored for years was now the force that could save his career. He felt a twinge of guilt, a reminder of the arrogance that had brought him here. Late that evening, an urgent email arrived. A client had caught wind of the issue and demanded answers immediately. Panic threatened to rise in Mark's chest, but Amina remained composed. Stay calm, she instructed. We stick to the facts. Show them we have a plan. Confidence comes from preparation, not ego. Mark followed her guidance, drafting responses under her supervision. Each action, each decision, reinforced a truth he could no longer ignore. Amina's strength was not just in her intellect, but in her calmness under pressure, her ability to navigate chaos without succumbing to fear. Together, they reached out to colleagues, clarifying missteps and presenting the revised plan. Amina's strategic thinking diffused tension, restored trust, and reminded everyone of their shared goals. Mark contributed where he could, but he followed her lead, a humbling experience that deepened his respect for her. Through the process, subtle moments of transformation occurred. Mark learned to listen without interrupting, valuing her input rather than dismissing it. Amina saw him struggle with humility, witnessing his willingness to change and acknowledge past mistakes. Mutual respect grew, grounded in action, not just words. By late evening, their efforts bore fruit. The immediate threat to Mark's reputation had been contained. Stakeholders and colleagues expressed relief and cautious admiration for their teamwork. Mark sank into his chair, exhausted but reflective. He looked at Amina, seeing not just a partner, but a guide, a force of intellect and courage he had ignored for far too long. The arrogance that once defined him had given way to humility. He understood, in a way he never had before, the cost of pride and the value of true partnership. Amina, though tired, smiled faintly. We did it, she said softly, not boasting, merely stating the truth. Mark exhaled deeply, the tension leaving his body in slow waves. We couldn't have done it without you, he admitted. I see that now. I've been blind for too long. Her eyes softened, the anger and hurt from years past mingling with hope and relief. I only helped because I believe in fairness, Mark. And because I believe in you, the part of you that can learn from mistakes. In that moment, their partnership transformed. Collaboration was no longer about fixing a crisis, it was about acknowledging each other's worth, understanding each other's strengths, and building trust. Though the immediate crisis was managed, the larger test remained: Mark's public image, his reputation, and the emotional scars between them. They had begun to rebuild not just the project, but their relationship. Trust, once broken by arrogance and neglect, was cautiously being restored. Mark realized that redemption required more than skill or strategy, it required sincerity, humility, and genuine respect. And for the first time, he was ready to give Amina the acknowledgement and equality she deserved. The room was tense, filled with colleagues, stakeholders, and a few journalists quietly observing from the back. Mark and Amina entered together, a united front, their expressions calm yet deliberate. The weight of the past weeks pressed heavily on Mark's shoulders, but he no longer carried it alone. Amina stood confidently beside him, her posture upright, eyes bright with intelligence and determination. She had meticulously prepared every point, every correction, every strategic response. Today was not just about the project, it was about proving what could be achieved when pride gave way to humility and collaboration. Mark began, his voice steady but honest. We faced a significant challenge. Mistakes were made, and I take full responsibility. But thanks to careful analysis and the insight of my team, particularly Amina, we have identified the issues and implemented a solution that ensures both accuracy and accountability. The room remained silent for a moment, processing the statement. Amina then stepped forward, her voice clear, articulate, and commanding. Transparency and precision were key. We re-evaluated every step of the process, corrected errors, and implemented a plan to prevent recurrence. Our goal has always been excellence, and now, we have achieved it together. Eyes turned toward her with respect. Colleagues exchanged impressed glances. Mark caught himself smiling subtly. This was a moment of true partnership, where recognition was given where it was due. Later, in a private corner of the office, the adrenaline faded, leaving space for reflection. Mark sank into a chair, exhaustion and relief washing over him. Amina sat opposite him, equally tired but serene. I can't believe how much I underestimated you, Mark admitted quietly. His voice carried both regret and awe. I mocked your accent, dismissed your ideas. I didn't see your brilliance until it was the only thing that could save me. Amina's eyes glimmered with unshed tears. It wasn't just about saving you, Mark. It was about showing you what you've been blind to all these years, that respect, equality, and acknowledgement matter. Your arrogance nearly cost us everything. He nodded solemnly. I know. And I promise, I'll never take that for granted again. I see you now, truly see you, and I understand what I've lost by ignoring you. Her hand reached across the table, brushing lightly against his. The gesture was simple, yet powerful, forgiveness and understanding intertwined with the acknowledgement of pain endured. The following day, an internal memo circulated across the company, praising the team for handling the crisis with integrity and professionalism. Amina's contributions were highlighted explicitly, a public acknowledgement that Mark had insisted upon. When the memo reached him, Mark felt a surge of emotion. He had learned that true leadership was not about ego or appearances. It was about recognizing and honoring the people who made success possible. He sent a private message to Amina, "You were right. Thank you. I will never forget this lesson." Amina smiled quietly, the long months of tension and hurt finally beginning to dissolve. She felt empowered, acknowledged, and respected. Their bond had been tested in the crucible of crisis, and it had emerged stronger than ever. That evening, back at home, the apartment felt warm and alive with quiet understanding. Mark approached Amina, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. I have spent so long measuring everything in terms of pride and appearances, he confessed. But I see now that my arrogance nearly destroyed us. I am sorry, truly sorry, for every word, every laugh, every dismissal. Amina's eyes softened. And I accept your apology, Mark. But words alone are not enough. We must build our respect and trust every day, through actions, through listening, through valuing one another. He nodded. I will. I promise. No more mockery, no more dismissals. Only partnership, respect, and love. For the first time in years, they embraced not just physically, but emotionally, two hearts reconciled, two minds aligned, a partnership renewed. In the quiet that followed, Mark reflected on the journey. Pride had been his greatest weapon and his most dangerous flaw. Arrogance had isolated him and nearly cost him everything. But humility, collaboration, and the courage to acknowledge Amina's worth had become his path to redemption. Amina, meanwhile, felt a profound sense of empowerment. Her voice had been heard, her intellect recognized, and her dignity restored. She had faced her own emotional barriers, frustration, anger, and resentment, and had used them to guide Mark toward growth, rather than allowing them to harden into bitterness. As they sat together, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, a quiet peace settled between them. The crisis was over, the scandal resolved, and the lessons were clear. Pride and arrogance could no longer dictate their lives. Respect, humility, and mutual understanding would shape their future. Mark reached for Amina's hand, intertwining fingers. "We've come far," he whispered. "And I promise, we'll move forward together, as equals." Amina's smile was soft but radiant. "Yes, together." The chapter of arrogance and humiliation had closed. The story of redemption, respect, and deep emotional connection had begun. Sunlight spilled over the city, golden and warm. Mark and Amina stood side by side on their balcony, looking out at the bustling streets below. The air was fresh, carrying the faint hum of life starting anew. There was a quiet strength in the way they stood together, a partnership no longer defined by ego or dismissal, but by mutual respect and understanding. Mark took a deep breath. "It feels different now," he said softly. "I never realized how much I needed to see clearly, not just my mistakes, but your worth. You've taught me what humility and respect truly mean." Amina smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. "And you've learned that power and status mean nothing without recognition of those who stand beside you. We've both grown, together." At work, Mark carried himself differently. Meetings were no longer opportunities to dominate or showcase his superiority. He listened actively, encouraged input, and acknowledged contributions, especially from Amina. Her strategies and insights were now celebrated openly, her voice no longer hidden beneath his shadow. Colleagues noticed the change. Respect followed naturally, not as a result of intimidation or appearances, but because of genuine acknowledgement and collaboration. Mark felt a quiet pride, not the superficial kind he had once sought, but a deeper, more enduring satisfaction, knowing he had become a better man and a more worthy partner. Amina, too, embraced her identity fully. She spoke freely, her accent no longer a source of self-consciousness, but a mark of heritage and confidence. She excelled professionally and personally, her intelligence and courage recognized and valued by everyone around her. One afternoon, Mark surprised Amina at a small gathering with friends and colleagues. He stood and addressed the room. "I want to acknowledge someone very important, my partner, Amina. Her brilliance, insight, and unwavering strength not only helped save our project but have taught me lessons about respect, humility, and love. I am endlessly grateful for her guidance and partnership." The applause that followed was warm, sincere, and deeply meaningful. Amina's eyes glistened, a mixture of pride and affection. This moment was more than recognition, it was a symbolic shift, a declaration that equality and respect had replaced arrogance and dismissal. Later, at home, the city quiet around them, Mark and Amina sat together, holding hands and reflecting. "I promise," Mark said, his voice steady, "never to let pride cloud my judgment or diminish you again. I will continue to learn, to listen, and to value you every single day." Amina rested her head against his shoulder. "And I promise to continue being myself, proud, strong, and unafraid to speak my truth. Together, we are stronger, and nothing can take that from us." The moment was simple, yet profound. Their love had endured trials of pride, humiliation, and crisis. Now it emerged deeper, rooted in trust, mutual respect, and equality. As the sun climbed higher, they gazed out at the city, not as individuals burdened by ego or past mistakes, but as partners ready to face the future side by side. Their journey had been difficult, the lessons hard-won, but it had forged something lasting, a love that was resilient, honest, and unshakable. Mark squeezed Amina's hand gently. "Here's to new beginnings," he said. Amina smiled, her voice filled with warmth and certainty. To us. Together. The city moved on, full of possibilities, and so did they. Pride had been tempered, respect restored, and love renewed. Their story, once fractured by arrogance and silence, now thrived in partnership, equality, and hope, a testament to the power of humility, forgiveness, and shared triumph.